further down the line on these topics and we start looking at specific things that we may need to do, like, and it's going to cost people money, also affect their water supply and everything, then I think we'll start to get some people turning out. So I think it's all we can do is the best we can, and I think those suggestions are real good on direct mailers and outreach, and see how we can get this. And you know, we'll outreach to the press too and try to get some things in the paper and some articles about what this means for people in the community.
I think the point I'm trying to make for everyone is that if we do this, we can always point to it. Because they're going to show up in droves when it's something controversial, and I go, well, I was never notified,
Right.
and at least we can say, here it is. We have proof that you were. I'm trying to cover our backside.
Yeah, I'm just laughing. One of the comments, people showed up at the governance meeting, and this was in 2018, and we were starting to pull together the agency, and they said, this law was passed in 2014, and this is the first I heard about it, and what have you people been doing for 4 years, just sitting around? And it's like, well, okay. So, yeah, we'll hopefully get some good turnout and good dialogue when we have the plan started to get drafted. And then March, we'll be doing the Representative Monitoring Network document, and we'll put that out for a 30-day comment period also. And then by June, Project Management Actions document. This will be the actions, which could be regulatory, non-regulatory, a whole range of things to get us where we need to be in 20 years. We'll do another workshop on that. And one thing we hadn't talked about was the implementation chapter, which is part of the administrative section. That implementation chapter talks about the cost and timeline of implementing the plan. So with all these things and that we want to do, we need to document to the state the means that we're going to have to be able to carry it out, whether we're going to seek grants or someone else is going to fund a certain action, or we're going to assess a fee. So any of those things you need to be explicit, because any of these things we do, including doing nothing, is going to incur a cost. And we need to document that and explain how we're going to cover those costs. And that's also transparent for the community and the public about what all this means and what the trade-offs are. So implementation is, the chapter is also going to be very important. There we go. And then July, September, we start packaging up the entire GSP in one package for a 60-day public comment period. We are required to have a 60-day comment period with our land use agencies. We'll be consulting with them early on, but we'll afford the public a 60-day comment period just to cover ourselves. And then November, December, we'll be having board hearings and adoptions in there, and there may be parts of the document you may direct staff to go make some changes or some adjustments depending on public comment, or taking a look at the whole plan in its totality. You might say, hey, this needs some tweaking. So we want to afford some time for you to direct us to go back and come back with some revisions before final adoption and submission by the end of January, and that will give us plenty of time in January to get it packaged up and submitted in time. So with that, that's sort of the schedule coming up. It's doable. There's a lot of work ahead, a lot of detail work, but we're definitely on track. One thing I want to talk about, and this is going to be an important topic, is because the water in Sac Valley doesn't stick with political boundaries. We can draw our lines we want for cities, counties, agencies, but the water is interconnected. So Interbasin Coordination is a project that we're involved with. It's being led by Consensus Building Institute. Tanya Carlone, who's been our facilitator, is leading this effort. This was funded through technical support services from the Department of Water Resources. Same task order that they gave to allow us to have facilitation. They also tasked them with doing coordination among the GSAs for interbasin coordination. It's a required element in the plan. You need to describe the steps you've taken to coordinate with your adjoining subbasin, because there's a provision in Sigma that says that one basin's plan cannot impede another basin from achieving their goals. So it really forces a dialogue among subbasins and some negotiations. If there's, let's say, one basin wants to drop their basin 100 feet in the next 40 years, and another basin wants to hold it stable, and water's going to flow downhill. So there needs to be some reconciliation between subbasins.
Will this obligate us in the future in any way to, because being uphill from some of these other subbasins, can this obligate us in any way to, will it impede our sustainability plan?
No. No. So that's the issue. Each agency has their own authority and discretion to approve their plan. What this will avoid is having a conflict go up to DWR where we say, we want the basin to be here, the adjoining subbasin is going to be there, and if both of us do this, one of us is going to be impeded from achieving our goal and have DWR sort it out, which we don't want to have happen. So we want to work it out.
So really, to answer your question, it could happen, but we don't want it to.
Right.
It could be that you're overdrawing on one side of a line. It's a geopolitical line, not
Right.
right.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So the process, this is where, and I've stolen these slides from CBI. These are the subbasins. They're working on the ones we determined were, pretty well connected. We need to talk to each other. For Wyandotte Creek, we're principally going to be looking at North Yuba, which they adopted their plan about a year ago. And a little bit Butte Subbasin, and a little touch of Vina to the north. So those will be the ones we're going to have the interaction on. So really, it's built upon interbasin coordination. They're connected. The management decisions in one subbasin can't impede another. So the first thing we started to do is to develop some of the technical information about what each subbasin's building in terms of their basin setting work. So the first initial effort was with each of the GSAs that have a grant, because each of us had put into a grant some tasks and some funding to deal with interbasin coordination. So we wanted to pull together to see what each of us tasked, to make sure whatever outcome we have, we can utilize our funds efficiently, so we're not duplicating efforts if it's modeling or some other things, and also to understand the technical pieces that we're working on. So this is the North Sac Valley developing the contacts and the matrix of who's doing what and what agencies are involved. So right now we're starting in the general coordination. The big effort now has been technical coordination, pulling together. We've brought in our technical consultants. There's about 5 different consultants in the various subbasins who've been working on basin setting work. So it's starting to build a matrix of what models they're using, what their hydrologic conceptual model is, what the initial determination about interbasin groundwater flows, to make sure, if one's saying, there's X number of 1,000 acre feet going this way and another agency's thinking it's going the other way, we need to get apples to apples on how the basin's operating. So that's really the starting point. And then as we get through this, if there are some conflicts, CBI will help facilitate discussions and trying to resolve them. And then there's also an option. A lot of this is tied to the framework of a voluntary agreement, and this was in the groundwater sustainability regulations. They have a voluntary agreement process. It's between adjoining subbasins. You don't have to, but it lists out some of the topics, which are the same topics we have here. So in discussions with staff, we're not thinking that we necessarily are going to have a voluntary agreement, but it's out there in case, and it's actually a good guidance on some of the materials we need to take a look at. I think if all goes well and there's no conflict and everything's kind of good, I don't think we need an agreement. We don't need.
Is there any hot spot on our boundaries with another camp?
No, I don't think this is
I
necessary.
didn't think so, that's
Yeah.
why I asked. But
Yeah, and, Yuba County Water Agency, they did their plan fairly early because with the Yuba Accord and all their management, they have it pretty well managed. They probably, my opinion, probably could have gone in for an alternative plan because they have it pretty well managed. So I don't think we're going to have too many issues. On the other side of the river, which is also a big buffer, Butte Subbasin is in fairly well balanced. So there'll be, as we work through, there may be some issues within the subbasin, but the adjoining subbasins, we may not have too many issues. So again, interbasin coordination and outreach materials. So the directory, as I showed, is getting developed. They're preparing some fact sheets and some other materials. I believe in December we should be getting some of the matrix information about what all the adjoining subbasins are doing, what modeling techniques they're using, and other materials. So it'll be very objective, so we can at least evaluate where everyone's at. And then, again, outlining if there are any issues, start outlining the process of resolving and resolving them, and then researching whether any of these things are necessary. CBI did take a look to see with the other submitted plans what kind of voluntary agreements had been submitted, and there really aren't too many, and what they found were very narrow and really not applicable. So again, this summer they're pulling together some of the technical information, modeling cross-boundary flows, stream aquifer interaction, and then as we get into the fall, we'll be starting to make this materials public, and then we'll be able to start really looking at if we do have any issues we need to resolve, and ideally we need to wrap them up and at least get a game plan by June or July to incorporate it into the plan. But this process, besides having a good outcome and getting things resolved, will be good documentation for us demonstrating that we did do due diligence in outreaching to our adjoining subbasins, which hasn't really been done to this extent too many places across the state. Again, so CBI is compiling this information. We'll be making that available. We're looking to place these materials on the Butte County webpage because they'll be applicable to all the subbasins in that regional area. And that is it. So two other quick things. The facilitation services I just explained with CBI is working. They're also going to be facilitating advisory committees. They're tasked to do that from DWR. DWR got Proposition 1 and Prop 68 monies to provide services to GSAs. And so the services we got from CBI are expiring in December. So we put an application in to continue it through 2021, including the interbasin work. We also requested that they update our communication and engagement plan. If you recall, that's the plan when we were going through governance, how we were going to outreach to the community and the public. It talks about this governance structure, advisory committee, and other means we have. That was done before we got organized, so having them update it and kind of looking ahead once the plan's submitted, what's that going to look like, will be important. And then they're also going to put it in a format that will be suitable for submission into the plan. So that will help check one of the boxes we have to do.
Could you back up one
Sure.
slide?
Sure.
No, the about CBI.
Yes.
Yeah, that one there. I wanted to look at that.
Sure. So the last topic we have for GSP is in the Vina subbasin. There's a lot of interest about ag conservation from orchards. So one of the things we're looking at, there's been a lot of work through UC Cooperative Extension, UC Davis looking at ag irrigation practices as it relates to nitrates in irrigated lands. So based upon their survey work, they were looking at some of the same issues about trying to identify what sort of irrigation practices people are doing, what sort of adoption of sort of the best practices are out there, and then what are the barriers and impediments for people to adopt some of the more efficient practices. Is it technical assistance? Is it cost? Is it whatever? And that will help drive recommendations on promoting ag conservation. So we're working with UC Davis, Farm Bureau, Ag Groundwater uses of Butte County to work on develop a survey that we hope to get going by the end of the year. Some of that will be applicable, I think, to Wyandotte Creek, some of the issues, even though we're not going to necessarily survey here. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So with that, I'll open up to any questions or thoughts.
I spoke too much during your presentation.
No.
Any questions or comments by anybody on the board?
That looks good to me.
I have no comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
So moving right along. Where we at, number 3?
Number 3.
Who's going to present?
Was Kelly on?
Kelly, we're on item number 3.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me? This is Kelly Peterson.
Yeah, you got to quit playing online poker while you're waiting.
I tell you, I lose every time.
Good
Well, great.
afternoon, Kelly.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. Thanks for your time today. I wanted to give you a real quick update on our conversations that we've been having regarding the Wyandotte Creek GSA Advisory Committee. As you know, the JPA requires the formation of an advisory committee with public members at those at-large seats and also agency appointees. Those specifically are from South Feather Water and Power and Cal Water. And we did have one tribe interested in also having an appointee, and that's the Maidu tribe of the Berry Creek Rancheria. However, there has not been any public interest, as we've been talking about today. So as you recall, in August, we came back and we asked for your direction on potentially revising the JPA to amend it so that an advisory committee wasn't necessarily a requirement, but more of an option, since we've been using public workshops and webinars to really engage the public up to this point. So we had some further conversations about it, and we kind of tossed the idea around more. And as the management committee, we felt like, in consideration of the upcoming work ahead and some really pointed discussions that do need to happen with sustainability management criteria and all the work ahead of us in the next year plus, that it would be best to actually retain and keep the structure of the advisory committee as it sits now, with those 3 agency appointed members and those other seats that are open, even if they're not filled, because we would hold those meetings and they would be open to the public. They would be Brown Act, so there would be a lot of opportunity for public participation in that way. And so, really the big reasons for that is keeping this structure after, further review is that we've already got these agencies that are actively participating and, interested in being involved. So if we keep it as is, I think the public can still engage and join. And also it will be less effort in terms of opening up the JPA, having all of our member agencies review that and approve it again. We wouldn't have to do any other further changes to our outreach and communication policy as well too. So it seems like a really good effort, straightforward bet. So I wanted to just open it up and see if any of the board members have any discussion or feedback on that approach that we've kind of worked through.
Any questions or comments?
I've got a question. So the seats on the advisory committee, does it include environmental groups like Butte Environmental Council or any groups like that?
It does, yes. There is one open seat for that. And the way it's set up basically is that there's, I believe, 3 seats for agricultural representation, 2 for domestic, 1 for business, and 1 for environmental. However, the board, it's up to the discretion of the board to change that if they see fit.
And is that filled? That one seat?
Actually, those are all at-large, application seats, and we have not had any applications up to this point.
So can we proceed without filling those seats and just leave it the way it sits? I was under the assumption that was the issue originally, was that we needed to change it because we couldn't fill the seats, but we can proceed the way it sits now with them vacant at the moment.
Correct, and that's the conclusion that we came to, was that that's probably the best bet forward.
Seems simpler and easier, and we can keep moving on.
Agreed.
It's a bad fire.
It's at the bathroom.
Any other questions or comments on this? And I forgot to ask the clerk, is there any public comment by email or otherwise?
I have not received any public comment on this item
Okay.
or any of the items that we've already discussed.
All right, thank you. I was failing with that. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll move on to the next item then. It's Wyandotte Creek GSA groundwater level monitoring network.
Yes, and this is an item that I put together. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation? Okay.
Yes, I
Okay, great.
It's getting better and better.
So at the last GSA board meeting, there were a few board members that had some questions about our monitoring network, and so we felt it was prudent to come back to you and provide some more information about what wells we do have in the subbasin, what we're monitoring, and what the levels look like. So I'll go through this, and then we can have some questions at the end. So as you recall, this is just a very brief overview map of our subbasin, which really spans the city of Oroville and then runs down the Feather River on the west side, and pretty much follows the county line, except for a small little jog, but basically around Wyandotte Creek. And then our eastern boundary is really a boundary that was put in place by DWR, and it sort of follows the boundary between the foothill area and where our alluvial subbasins are defined by DWR that are specific to Sigma. So I'll just go through a little bit more about the well depths of the monitoring wells we have, the types of wells we have, the conditions in these wells, and then touch back and kind of circle this all back to what we've found in the water budget results also. So I put this map together. As you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but what I did is I put together this heat map, and it basically shows the 13 monitoring wells that we do have currently, and it's color coded by depth. So if you can see down on the very southern border here, this is one of our most shallow wells, and it's light in color. And then if you head up here to the middle of the basin or so, this dark blue is our deepest well. So we've got ranges between 80 and close to 650 feet between those. That purple star there in the middle is the new well that we've been talking about that's currently in process of getting approvals for installation. That would be a new monitoring well. So one thing when we talk about well depth, this graphic over to the side, we talk about total well depth, and that's really what these numbers are that we're looking at today is how far the hole is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the entire well is pulling water. So between different types of wells, it can be screened at different areas, and telling us information about different areas underground. So just to keep that in mind. we'll kind of start here. We've got two management areas in Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. In general, this northern area is what we're calling the Wyandotte Creek Oroville Management Area, which covers a lot of Thermalito Water and Sewer District land and the city of Oroville proper. So in this management area, there's 3 municipal wells, and that's what the CWS, the California Water Service, indicates. And then we've also got one other well here close to the airport out in that direction. So that gives you some indication of the well depths also. And then if you go into the southern part of the basin, that's where we've got a few more different wells ranging in depth from, like I said, the 80 feet down on the southern border all the way up to our deepest, which is about 650. But if you notice, we've only really got one deep well that's in our monitoring network at this point. 12 out of the 13 are less than 340 feet deep. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what we're monitoring and where we're at with that. Then we kind of want to look at types of wells. So there's different types of wells that we monitor to understand different things. There's municipal wells, which are indicated in this blue triangle here at the top. There's 3 of those. And then we've got residential or domestic wells that are indicated with the brown box to give you an idea where those are located. And then the remainder are these green circled wells, which are irrigation wells. So we do have a pretty good mix here. And like I said, right about in this area is where our first monitoring well will be. This subbasin currently does not have a monitoring well, but this will be a new location for that. And you can see it's filling in that gap in that area. So when we start to look at this all together, you can see up here in the Wyandotte Creek Oroville Management Area, we've got the 1 residential and the 3 municipals. And then down here in Wyandotte Creek Oroville South, we've got a mixture of residential and irrigation wells. And these are pretty much listed by depth so that you can kind of just see what that range is. And I think if you'd like to look at this more, I know I'm kind of going through it fast, but we can post this to the website also for future reference because it is a lot of information. So one thing I wanted to talk about now is the conditions. So groundwater levels, they fluctuate every season with precip, with groundwater use. There's a number of things, but they fluctuate by season, and then they also fluctuate over time over the years. So, but what we've found is that mostly the conditions underground are influenced by the type of water year. So when we say we have a really dry water year or a really wet water year, that really has a lot to do with the precipitation that falls through that water year and the runoff that's coming from our streams and such. So this graph here is an example to show you a hydrograph, which basically shows the years along the bottom axis here, and then our water surface elevations here along this vertical axis. And so each time we go out in the field and stick a tape down in a well and get a point, that's one little dot on this graph. So that we can track it over time. Most of these are visited 4 times a year. But that new well that we've been talking about, that will have an hourly data logger in it. So we can get a lot more information in a bunch of different areas because it will have, I'll talk about that next one. But it'll have basically screened intervals at 5 different areas underground to understand more. So what we found is that most wells in Wyandotte Creek, regardless of the type of well or how deep they are historically, we have generally stable conditions here in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin. So here's a little bit more information about what that looks like. So we're starting off here in this Oroville management area. These are the 4 wells that we looked at, 3 of the municipals. These are cow water wells, and one of these is the residential well. So as you can see, there's generally slight dips over the year. But in some of these years, you know, we see these changes because of water year types, dry years versus wet years, and also use. But if we were to see something, you know, pretty drastically declining, that would give us an indication that there is drastic declines and chronic lowering of groundwater conditions. So while there are some slight declines, you can generally see here that there is stability here. And then as you move down into the other management area south of that, here are some additional hydrographs, which also kind of indicate, you know, how things have been over the years. Some of these do have a red line on them. I want to point out what that is. That's an indication of where the ground surface is, so that you can see basically how far down that is from the ground surface. And in order to make these graphs apples to apples, some of the ground surface elevations don't appear on them because they would be, you know, higher than the scale of the graph. So as you can see, there's definitely use, but in general, we're seeing some pretty straight lines here, which is a good thing. These are the additional wells that were not included in the basin setting draft, but I grabbed the hydrographs off of the website. And I wanted to point out one thing in particular, because I know we talked about this at the last meeting too, but say for this one, for example, you'll see some big missing gaps here in between certain years. And in this one in particular, there was a change in land ownership and some difficulties, you know, working with those folks and getting that well back online and creating those relationships again, and, you know, getting a lock on their gate so that we could have access to it again. But now, as you can see, it's picked up again, and that data will continue into the future, so that we can still get a handle on the conditions of that well. So overall, there's 13 monitoring wells in our subbasin that we monitor. 3 are municipal, ranging from about 130 to 340. 6 are irrigation wells, and like I said, most of those are shallower than the 650, but we do have the one deep well at 656 for irrigation. And then we've got 4 residential wells that we monitor that are relatively shallow. So that gives us a good idea of what's going on in the upper zones of the aquifer. So, like I said, most wells in Wyandotte Creek, regardless of the type or depth, generally have stable groundwater conditions. And this really does tie into some of the data that we see in the modeling that was done for the basin setting work in the water budgets. So if we look at some of our historic hydrology, you know, which is looking at, you know, close to a 50-year time frame, and our current land use practices, what the modeling is telling us is that on average every year we have about 100 acre feet increase every year. So that's a good indication of stability there. But then if you look at more recent hydrology, which is instead of that 50-year time frame, you're looking at, you know, from the period of 2000 to 2018, we do start to see some reductions. So we don't have surpluses if we look at that time period. And I think that's a big indication of the fact that we've had many dry years as opposed to wet years in that last, you know, 2000 to 18 time frame. So while they fluctuate by season and over time, it is mostly directly tied to the water year type. And so just to pull this full back circle, this GSP that we're working on and really the work that we're doing here as a group to develop the GSP is our path forward in outlining, how we're going to track what the conditions are and what we're going to do about it if they change. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions or discussion.
Any question?
Are you still looking for more monitoring wells?
Absolutely. Did you hear the question? Are you looking for more monitoring wells?
I would say absolutely, yes.
I'm curious, why the one deep well? Is it location and formation, or that 600-foot one? It's not in Calwater. It's right in the middle.
Yeah, that's an irrigation well.
Is that like straight west of Palermo, a little southwest of Palermo, maybe? I can't
It
really
looks
tell
like
on the map.
Yeah, so 08 MO1. I can pull it up real quick and check. I believe that one is out off of Middle. No, I don't think Middle Fontaine's out there, but I don't know how they chose the wells to begin with necessarily, but that one in particular, it's included in. It is included in the whole set and has been here since, as you can see, 1961 or so.
It just doesn't, there's got to be some formation change. And then the other question is, saltwater intrusion, has that ever been tested on that well, being that deep?
So that well is not part of our saline intrusion monitoring.
I think it would be important to check that one.
Okay, that's a good point.
And that was my questions. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I have a question. Could you go back to that other slide with the, you're next to the last one? No, the last one just before the,
Sorry, wrong way. Here?
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, down there in green, it says to generate a 50-year time period, 2004, 2005 were repeated in modeling because they're normal
Correct.
years. I don't understand that. I don't understand why you would pick out those 2 years for a projection when they're the outliers. Could you explain that?
Sure, no problem. So in order to generate these water budgets, what happens is we look at the hydrologic conditions basically throughout that time period of 1971 to 2018, because that at the time that we were working on it, 2018 was the most recent. But for the requirements of Sigma, you do have to do a historic look, and it has to be a 50-year time frame. So since those 2 years, 2004 and 2005, were both considered normal water years, they were repeated twice in the modeling so that it would give the most, normal, a more normalized indication of how things were. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes into a whole nother topic of modeling and how water budgets are developed, et cetera, which is not exactly my lane, but Paul might be able to speak to that a little bit more.
Well, you could say it's more of a smoothing.
It is.
If you want
really,
to
'cause it's
smooth your
bringing-
graph, you take the middle and repeat it.
Right.
I would argue it distorts what was actually going on, because over that 50 years, there was a dramatic change in the last 40% of it. So anyway, I have concerns about that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Any other questions or comments?
Bill, I have one question.
You can ask all you want.
Okay. My question is there ever been any thought or there ever been any involvement of theft of water from any of these wells? Or is that even a possibility?
Theft of water.
Since you have,
Well-
you have an open well, or you have a well, I don't know whether, are they out there where they're not monitored, or, and I'm new to the board, so I'm
Sure.
asking perhaps a question that's maybe already been answered, but,
So there's two ways to steal water. One is you drive up to the pump and you pump it out of the ground into a truck or something, and that would probably be very minimal. Another way would be to horizontal drill to get to a water table under a neighbor's property, which in California, by law, we don't allow. You're supposed to drill directly below your own
Right.
property, and as long as you use it on your property, up until this time, we weren't charging you or taxing you or doing anything.
Yeah.
right.
But I have never heard of a horizontal drill of a well for water here,
No.
and I've never heard of enough theft out of a pump to be a concern. Although David Munch told me up in the foothills, which we're not talking about, that did occur, where people were stealing water to water their,
Their gardens?
Yes.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've never heard of it in the valley.
We haven't
Anybody
heard,
of that?
we haven't heard anything of people going in and tapping into an ag well. And I think they're difficult.
You can't
you-
transport
and
enough
you
to
can't
really
get
make
to
a
it.
dent.
But during the drought, 2014, 2015, we did have reports, and this does affect Thermalito, Cal Water, people going up to your hydrants and tapping into the hydrants and filling up their water tanks and going selling their water during the
Right,
drought.
right.
Those things, and people taking water out of Lake Orville and other lakes illegally.
Okay.
And we did, in the downtown part of Oroville, I know some commercial buildings, they had to take their taps off.
Right, the ones in the front.
Yeah, because they had Cal Water, and people would drive up and
Turn the water on, yeah.
fill their tank.
Yeah, well, that's so the well itself, it would be pretty much impossible to remove the pump aside or run an alternative tube down in there with some type of pump to pump water out of it. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to picture it,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we're about 400 miles too far north for that to be a worry. Down
Okay.
in the desert, they do all that kind of stuff.
Right, okay.
You know, but that was a fair question. It made me think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think. All right. Great question. Any other questions on this item? Was there any public comment on this item? No? Okay. Okay, so we're up to multi-completion groundwater monitoring well installation through the DWR Technical Services Support. So this is going to be a report on that single new well, I guess?
It is. It is,
All right.
yes. This is Kelly again. As you recall, this is a program through DWR referred to as their Technical Support Services Program. We've been approved for the first multi-completion well in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin, which will be collecting data on an hourly basis, which will be very helpful. The proposed design currently includes 5 casings in one borehole at differing depths, so we can get an understanding of both the shallow areas and the deep areas. So basically, right now, we've received some draft land use agreements, and those have been provided to the Wyandotte Creek GSA legal counsel. Mr. Ramos is on the phone today, and through the Teams meeting link. And so once those are presented to the landowner, and also a few other items are wrapped up, they will be brought to the GSA board hopefully soon here, maybe next month, for approval as well. The advice back from our legal counsel, I can just sum this up, and then Andrew, if you have anything to add, that might be helpful. But in general, his advice was to, he recommended to have a recording agreement for 20 years on this, in case the property does change hands. and that would require just a legal description from the landowner or title company, and executing a short form with some associated fees with that. But basically, the agreement would follow whoever owns the land. I'm sorry, it would follow the land and not the landowner for access to be able to monitor this well. One other recommendation is that currently DWR is going to be filing a notice of exemption for this project through CEQA, and the recommendation was that the GSA also do the same. And the last recommendation was in regards to the landowner himself. So this is one of our directors, Mr. Bynum, is the landowner from which this well is going on. And so to avoid any appearance of a potential conflict of interest, and you know, there is no financial benefit to the landowner for this. So you know, he's determined that there isn't a conflict of interest, but in an abundance of caution, that this director should disclose his interest and also recuse himself from any participation in decisions on this item. For example, the next item on the agenda, in which case I think he's agreed to do that as well too. So that's coming forward and moving ahead. And once we get through the land use agreements and some of these other items, they'll be brought to you for consideration of approval. And I'll open it up to anyone else on the management committee or Andrew, if you have anything to add.
Kelly, this is Andrew. You summarized my advice well. Thank you.
Okay, great.
All right. Any questions or comments by the board?
No.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
We probably need any public comment on that.
I have not received any public comment on this item, Mr. Chair.
Beating down the door. Get in here. Okay, number 6, consideration to approve expenditures to fund well drilling fees
So
associated.
I should recuse myself.
Right.
Okay. All right. Clerk will make note that he left. All right. Go ahead, present this, please.
Sure thing. So one of the items that came before us through DWR in this process is that they are unavailable to pay for the well drilling fees associated with this, and those are required by Butte County Environmental Health. So far, the schedule of fees is at $519 for that, and so we wanted to bring it forward to the GSA board to see if that was something that you would want to consider expending some of the budget on. I wrote this as a recommendation for a fee up to, but not to exceed, $550 in case there are any changes between now and when the actual application does get filed, just so we don't have to bring it back to you again. But with that, I'll open it up for any questions or discussion.
My thoughts are, the more of these we could get, the more accurate our science will be. So I think it's something we should consider doing. Unless we could get the county to waive it, you know, anybody at the county could do that. I doubt they would.
They're pretty tough over there. And
Are they? All right.
The
What's the thoughts
the-
of the board? Anybody else got a thought on it?
I just have a question. So it's my understanding that DWR has approved of this monitoring well, and they're not able to pay because would it be considered a gift of public funds or what? And I know we have ample in our budget, but I was just curious.
Right. So basically, what they came back and said was that their legal team came back and really indicated that use of public funds to a county
Okay.
For this purpose was really a big no-no on their side. So they were not able to do that.
Oh, thank you, Kelly.
Sure thing.
Just as an aside, I'm totally off the subject, but we have an evacuation from the roundabout to Long Bar Road because of a current fire. So if you have any concerns with that, I just wanted to let you know. Any other questions or comments about the item before us?
Do you need a motion to approve this?
Huh? Yes. So, yes, that's why I brought it up. There's a fire going. Yeah, we need a motion to approve this.
I move to approve the
I'm-
permit fees.
Would you like?
I
to-
second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed,
Aye.
nay? Okay, it passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, there was no public comment on this item either.
Oh, thank you. You're on it. Yeah, I got you trained, or you got me trained. That's good. All right. So we'll invite him, Bill back in. Thank you for volunteering your land to do this. Thank you. Okay, number 7, discussion regarding meeting dates for November and December. All right. Do we need a meeting in November, December? We have Turkey Day and we have Christmas. I mean,
We could probably pass on November. I think there'll be a sufficient number of things in December.
okay. Is that fair enough with everybody on the board? We have consensus on it? Any public comment on this?
Do you want to have it the third Thursday, since the fourth Thursday is Christmas Eve
That sounds great.
or Christmas?
Everybody good with that? Third Thursday of December?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, management team, is everyone okay with that? Did I miss anything?
Would that be the 17th? Jackie?
You can make me look for my calendar?
Yes.
Yes, Bill said. The other Bill.
Yes.
All right,
You good, Jan?
And Mr. Chairperson, there has been
Yeah.
no public comment on this item.
2 o'clock?
Okay. All right. So we don't need a motion or anything, we just set that? All right.
You okay?
Okay, so the Wyandotte Creek Financial Report, number 8.
Yes, this is a new format, just to get a better idea of where we are on budget. But it's just meant to be as a written report. So if there's any questions, take them.
Okay, we'll open up. Is there any questions or comments on the Wyandotte Creek Financial Report as of October 8th? I see no interest from the board.
I looked at it.
No
I
public,
don't have any questions.
Thank you. No public comment?
no public comment on any correspondence.
Okay, Management Committee update. Who's verbal? That's a joke. Who's giving that presentation?
I
Management-
don't think I don't have anything from my side. I don't know about the rest of the management committee. I'll turn it over to them.
Nope, I think we're good.
Very good. We learned how to run a meeting.
I have one comment.
Oh, good.
And we should have introduced him at the beginning of the meeting. Our alternate from the TWSD is now Bruce Whiston,
Oh, I thought everybody knew you, Bruce. I'm sorry.
Brad Taggart.
Welcome aboard,
Thank you.
and thank you for doing this.
You betcha.
All right, that was great. Board recruitment update.
Yes, this is Kelly Peterson again, and just wanted to let you guys know that the Butte County Board of Supervisors did appoint our alternate domestic well representative, Rick Wilburn, from the, I believe he also sits on the Board of Directors from South Feather Water and Power. So we now have 9 out of 10 positions filled, and we are just looking for that alternate agricultural well representative, and that's it.
Okay. No public comment on that, right?
There's been no public comment on this item.
Okay, anyone from the public like to speak on a thing not agendized, we can't take action on it? There is none?
Have not received any written communication on this
All
item.
right,
either.
so we're going to adjourn the meeting. We'll see you back here December 17th, was it? Yep. And thank you very much
Yeah.
for putting up with me in this fire.
Thank you.
I hope everything's okay for you. Okay, one added thing, if anybody that was impacted by the latest fire, the Bear Fire, the North Complex, whatever you want to call it, we're going to have a public meeting at 4 o'clock for information. I called it because there's so much misinformation out there. It'll be at the Southside Community Center. The staff will be there to answer questions. So if you know of anybody in need, have them come by. Thank you.